The wildest part is this. My whole neighborhood spent $771,000 fixing up their pool, their roads, their community center, and their front gate. And none of it was actually theirs. And the moment it all finally snapped into focus, like a chair leg cracking under someone who's been acting entitled for too long, was when an HOA lady tried to write me up for the color of my mailbox. Yeah, my mailbox. Back in February 2018, I was doing what I always did on Tuesday mornings, coffee laptop scanning public filings like a nosy librarian with a finance degree. A bankruptcy trustee had posted a liquidation schedule, and buried in that schedule was a residential development's common area infrastructure listed for $2.3 million. Pool facility, community center, 3.8 miles of private roads, the entrance gate, everything that wasn't a residential lot. It was basically the skeleton of the neighborhood, everything between people's houses that makes a place feel like a community. I read it on a Tuesday, and I closed the following month. Now I know how that sounds, like I woke up and decided to buy a neighborhood for fun. That's not what it was. I'd been investing in real estate for years, and I'd learned something simple. Documents don't lie, people do. The paperwork was clean, the asset list was clear, and the opportunity was rare. I drove the development that weekend, walked the common areas, checked the plat, and called my attorney on Monday. Her name's Grace Sharp. Calm, the kind of lawyer who reads title history the way other people read mystery novels. If there's a buried clause hiding in Section 14 of something recorded in 1998, Grace will find it, and she'll find it before the person who wrote it remembers it exists. I told her I'd buy it on one condition. We needed a license agreement with the HOA recorded with the county the same day the deed transferred. Because the HOA was already using those facilities, maintaining them, insuring them, acting like they were theirs. Without a license agreement, day one turns into chaos. With it, everything is defined: what they can use, what they can't touch, what they must ask permission for. The HOA president at the time, guy named Walt, signed the agreement on April 3rd, 2018. He asked 3 clarifying questions, no negotiation, just signed. And here's the thing, he understood exactly what he signed, especially Section 6. That section said, plain as day, no capital improvement over $5,000 on any parcel titled to my trust without my written consent, signed improvement agreement, all of it. Walt kept that knowledge in his head, like it was a personal secret. Then he moved to Savannah in June 2021 and didn't tell anyone what he'd signed. Not in any orientation binder, not in any checklist, not in any handoff note. 4 boards, 14 members over 5 years, and not one of them pulled the county deed to verify what they actually owned. So they just kept going. They renovated the pool, $340,000. They resurfaced the roads, $180,000. They built an addition on the community center, $156,000. They upgraded the entrance gate, $95,000. All on parcels titled to my trust since 2018. $771,000 in homeowner assessments and dues spent on my property without asking me, and I live about 400 feet away. I watched construction crews come and go like it was normal, because at first I honestly assumed someone would do the basic thing any board should do: check the documents, call the owner, send an email, something. But basic is funny in HOA land. Basic gets replaced by whatever the last board told us, and then that becomes gospel. I stayed patient. That's what you do in property matters. You don't lunge early. You let the record build. You let the paper trail get fat. Because the longer someone keeps doing something wrong in writing, the harder it is for them to pretend it never happened. Then on a cool Tuesday morning in mid-March, Piedmont, Carolina weather, doing that thing where it can't decide if it's winter or spring, I took my dog for his usual walk. His name was Archie. 7-year-old Rhodesian Ridgeback, built like a tank and emotionally committed to inspecting every patch of grass like it owed him money. He'd walked Briarwood Court every morning at 7:15 for his entire life. Archie had strong opinions about which verges were worth investigating and which weren't, and he did not care about anyone's HOA politics. The Bradford pears on the east side of the street were blooming, that brief bright white that looks pretty for 10 days and then turns into a sidewalk problem. Archie was sniffing the verge in front of number 14 when I heard a front door open behind me. I turned, and there she was, Patricia, the architectural review chair. Clipboard in hand, 3 sheets, clipped tight, posture stiff like she slept in a rule book. I'd seen her at maybe 2 community events in 6 years. I knew who she was. She did not in any meaningful sense know who I was, but she said my name carefully the way someone does when they looked it up and practiced it once. Mr. OA, she said like she'd rehearsed the pronunciation in a mirror. I've been meaning to catch you. I have some compliance items for your property. Archie looked at the clipboard with the bored curiosity of a dog who has learned clipboards do not throw balls. Go ahead, I said. And I'll give her this. She went in order smooth efficient like she'd done it 100 times. First, lawn edging. She said the edge along my front line was irregular, and the CC and RS required a maintained edge no less than 3 inches from the sidewalk boundary. Second, my mailbox post. I'd painted it a dark charcoal gray 4 years earlier. She informed me charcoal gray was not on the approved exterior palette, which allowed 8 shades of brown, 2 shades of black, and hunter green. Third, my front door, deep navy blue, needed to be brought into compliance within 30 days. Approved door colors ran to 3 shades of red, a handful of neutrals, and a dark green that was aggressively not navy. She finished and looked up like she expected the standard homeowner reaction: defensiveness, bargaining, maybe a little pleading. I let her finish completely. Because I've learned interrupting people in the middle of their prepared speech is inefficient. You learn more when they get to the end. Then I said, calm as I could, I'm not under your HOA. Her clipboard lowered 1/2 inch. Every property on Briarwood Court is subject to the covenants, she said like she was reading it off a card. It's recorded in the county. Pull my deed, I told her. It's public record. Lot 1, Briarwood Commons. Costs nothing. Takes 4 minutes. She waved the clipboard a little like the paper itself had authority. I have the map. Your address falls within... My lot is on the map, I said. Look at what the map says about my lot. Archie tugged slightly. He'd found something interesting, and I corrected the leash and started walking. Have a good morning, Miss Patricia, I said, and I walked home. Now here's where it gets funny in that dry, I can't believe this is real kind of way. She didn't pull the deed. She called the police. At 9:52 a.m., she called the municipal non-emergency line and requested an officer come confirm HOA jurisdiction and document my non-compliance posture for the HOA enforcement file. I know the exact time because when the officer arrived, he showed me the dispatch record with that awkward kindness cops have when they realize they've been sent into something that's unraveling fast. Officer Daniels arrived at 11:40 in a marked unit, mid-30s, professional, neutral expression, like a guy who's mediated 100 fence line feuds and already knows everyone's about to say you don't understand. I invited him in, offered coffee. He declined. We sat at my kitchen table. Mr. OA, he said, I received a call regarding a dispute about HOA jurisdiction at this address. Can you help me understand the situation? Of course, I said. I went to my home office, opened the second drawer of my filing cabinet, where I keep the documents I use most, and brought back a folder. First document, my title certificate for Lot 1, my residence. It included a little 2-line carve-out from the original 1998 declaration buried in a definition section excluding my lot from the HOA's covenant jurisdiction. It had always been carved out. Developer did it. I kept it. I let Officer Daniels read that. Then I put the second document on top, the trust acquisition deed and the asset schedule from 2018. The list of parcels, pool, facility, community center, road, right-of-way parcels, entrance, infrastructure. Everything the HOA had been treating as common property for years, titled to my trust. He read for about 2.5 minutes. You could see his face change in stages, focus, then a second pass, then stillness, like his brain was rearranging the room around new information. He looked up and set the papers down carefully like they suddenly mattered more than paper. Sir, he said, do you own the whole neighborhood? I actually laughed once because what else do you do with a question like that? The infrastructure, I said. The common areas, roads, pool, gate. The lots belong to homeowners, but everything in between. Yeah, that's mine. He looked at the carve-out again. And your lot isn't under the HOA. Never has been, I said. There was a silence, one of those silences where you can hear the refrigerator hum and you realize someone else's entire morning plan just died. Officer Daniels touched his radio like he was about to call dispatch, then decided he didn't want to be the guy who said this out loud over the air. Finally, he asked, is there anything you'd like me to convey to the HOA? Tell them to read their license agreement, I said. He wrote it down, nodded once, and left. That afternoon at 2:30, I called Grace. The architectural review chair called the police on me this morning, I said. Grace paused. Over what? My mailbox post. Another pause longer, like her mind was deciding whether to file this under nuisance or comedy. I told her everything. Clipboard, violations, my not under your HOA, police, officer at my kitchen table. When I finished, Grace said very quietly, this is the moment. I looked out my front window at Briarwood Court, the road curving into the development, the entrance gate visible at the corner, my gate, my parcel being managed by people who hadn't checked a deed in years. I've been patient, I said. 4 projects, $771,000. And 18 months of them ignoring your 2023 letter like it was spam. Grace didn't argue. File everything she said, all of it. And that's what we did. Grace pulled the entire chain of Title 1997 developer filing, subdivision plat, CC and RS, the holding entity documents, the 2017 bankruptcy, the trustee's liquidation schedule, my 2018 acquisition deed, 26 years of ownership history compressed into a clean timeline. And the timeline made one thing painfully obvious. The HOA was a governing body without property. They could tell people their shutters were the wrong color, while standing on land they didn't own. Grace explained how the developer originally split ownership common late 1990s structure. The HOA governed the residential lots, but the developer kept the bones in a separate holding company. When the developer went, Chapter 7, those assets went onto the liquidation schedule, and I bought them. And that license agreement Walt signed in 2018, it was recorded, public, searchable, sitting in the county portal like a book on a shelf no one bothered to open. So Grace drafted a formal notice, 14 pages, and we sent it certified mail to every board member individually. Not the board, not the HOA, each person. I wanted them to walk to their mailbox on the same morning sign for the same envelope and feel the weight of it land on them personally. Pages 1 through 4 established ownership and included the license agreement with Section 6 highlighted. Pages 5 through 10 laid out the 4 unauthorized projects: approval date, completion date, cost, parcel title holder, no improvement agreement. Supporting documents behind each board minutes, invoices, permits, listing the HOA as owner county deeds, proving otherwise. Then page 14, the part that made everybody's stomach drop. Section 9, termination. 3 or more material breaches gave grounds to terminate the license with 30 days written notice. We had 4. That meant on paper I could close the pool lock, the community center, shut the gate, and restrict access to private roads. And no, I wasn't planning to actually strand 340 families like it was some cartoon villain move, but they didn't know that yet. And sometimes the only way people respect a contract is when they realize the other side can actually enforce it. Friday evening, the board called an emergency session. Their attorney pulled up the county portal in front of them and confirmed what my notice said in about 11 seconds. Quiet hit the room like a heavy blanket. Then the real twist showed itself because the negligence was bad enough, but what came next was worse. Grace had sent them a letter in July 2023, quoting Section 6 in full, identifying the community center expansion as an ongoing violation, requesting construction, halt, demanding a written response. Their attorney responded with 1 paragraph under review, and the board kept building anyway. Then they approved the gate upgrade after that letter. That's not just oops. That's you were told and you proceeded. Once the lawsuit was filed, their insurance carrier basically split the story in 2. Pre-notice projects might be covered as error, post-notice projects triggered the intentional act exclusion question. And while that played out, Grace referred the matter to the North Carolina Attorney General's Consumer Protection Office. Because 340 households had been charged assessments for improvements to property the HOA didn't own without disclosure. The AG opened an inquiry within weeks. Suddenly the board wasn't just dealing with me, they were dealing with the state asking for records. That's when their posture changed from, let's explore a path forward, to please don't burn the house down. We met. Long meeting. Lawyers across the table. 2 board members there as representatives. One new guy who looked like he'd aged 5 years in a week, and another who had emailed back in 2023 saying, this might be a big deal, then let herself be soothed by legal is handling it. And one more thing showed up in that meeting that told me everything. Craig, the board president, during the post-notice mess, brought his own personal attorney. Quiet move. Loud meaning. He was separating his exposure from the HOAs. Negotiations ran 6 weeks. Numbers moved. Arguments flew. The defense tried to frame it as good faith governance built on inherited assumptions. And Grace kept answering with the same line. Everything before July 14, 2023 is an inheritance problem. Everything after is a decision problem. In the end, the settlement hit like a gavel. $771,000 restitution, every dollar spent on those 4 projects returned. $720,000 retroactive license compensation, 6 years of undermarket use reconciled. $340,000 for asset modification damages because permanent unauthorized changes reduce an owner's discretion. $875,000 punitive component because proceeding after notice has consequences. Total, $2.706 million. And here was the part I cared about even more than the money, because money gets spent and forgotten. We recorded an amended license agreement with the county. 22 pages. Not vague, not trust us. Step-by-step process for any improvement over $5,000, a mandatory annual board review with the full agreement read into the minutes, signed acknowledgments by every board member, and onboarding requirements so the knowledge couldn't walk out the door with the next Walt. That was the fix, make the truth structural. After the settlement went out to the membership, the neighborhood did what neighborhoods do when they finally see the bill. They voted Craig out 287-18 in the community center meeting room, my community center with the addition built without my consent. He sat in the back, took the result, stood, and left without speaking. Patricia resigned too. 2 sentences, no drama, just gone. A few days later, the new interim chair good guy named Terrence walked to my door and handed me a letter signed by the incoming board. Apology. Not performative, just sober. Like people who finally understand they've been building on ground they never surveyed. And the funniest thing, the little spark that lit the whole bonfire was still sitting out front. My mailbox post, charcoal gray. A neighbor named Carol, high school biology teacher, reasonable person, crossed the street one Saturday morning in early April and asked me, "Is it true you've owned all of this since 2018? I told her the truth. The deed said it. I didn't need to announce it. She looked at the mailbox post and said, "Is that why you kept it that color?" I stared at it for a second and Archie shifted in his patch of sunlight like he'd heard a joke coming. "No," I said, "I just like it." Carol laughed, real laughter, the kind that only happens when tension finally finds a harmless place to land. And that's when it hit me, the little moral hiding inside all the legal language. Power loves comfort. People will enforce rules with absolute confidence, while never once checking whether they actually have the foundation to stand on. And the scary part isn't the malicious ones, it's the ones who aren't trying to be villains at all, the ones who just inherit a story and stop asking questions because asking questions is uncomfortable. So let me ask you something honestly. If you found out your HOA had spent your money improving property it didn't own, would you blame the board for being reckless? Or would you blame the system for letting comfortable assumptions run a whole neighborhood? And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a landlord, a manager, anyone with a clipboard and a little too much confidence, tell me your story. Where did they cross the line? And what did you do when they did?